Here's the thing, nobody inside the Cleveland Browns organization actually wants to say out loud right now. The quarterback competition they promise the public is real, not a managed, choreographed show where the veteran collects his reps and the rookie learns to carry a clipboard. A genuine, unresolved, increasingly uncomfortable fight for the starting job. And I know that sounds like something that gets dismissed the moment it leaves someone's mouth, but I have been watching this thing unfold from every angle I can get my hands on. The tape, the practice reports, the evaluator language, the way beat reporters who were firmly planted in the other camp have quietly started adjusting their framing. What I keep coming back to is this: the data is cleaner than anyone on the established side of this debate wants to admit. Let me set the scene properly, because the context around Shedeur Sanders' first NFL start keeps getting skipped over in the rush to get to numbers. It was week 12 of the 2025 regular season, Cleveland versus Las Vegas. The Browns were 2-8, not navigating a difficult stretch that good teams sometimes hit mid-season. 2-8, the kind of record that communicates to everyone inside a building, front office to practice squad, that the year is over. The fan base had detached weeks earlier. National media had stopped covering Cleveland as a football story and started covering them as a cautionary tale about contracts and dysfunction. The locker room itself had taken on that quiet, distant energy you see in teams that have already mentally packed up. You can see it in the body language during huddles. You can hear it in the post-game quotes that sound like people reading from a script nobody cares about anymore. That is the environment Shedeur Sanders walked into for his first professional start. Sit with that before we move forward, because what that moment actually required of him goes far beyond what any box score captures. He was not just managing the normal weight of a debut, the nerves, the speed of the game, the complexity of an NFL defense versus anything he had seen in college. He was managing teammates who had stopped investing. He was managing a crowd there out of geographic loyalty more than genuine belief. He was managing a defense that spent an entire week picking apart his college tape, cataloging his footwork tendencies, building a game plan designed to exploit a first-time starter who might freeze under pressure. And then the Raiders sent a blitz before he'd settled into anything. 3rd and 8, extra rushers coming from angles designed to force a rushed decision or a panicked release. This is exactly the play defenses use to break young quarterbacks, not to sack them, but to expose them. They want the processing to short circuit. They want the throw to come out off platform so they can build on that psychological advantage for the rest of the game. He saw it coming. He felt the protection adjusting, used his feet to slide laterally rather than retreating into chaos, reset his base, and threw a 52-yard completion to Isaiah Bond. I want to be precise about what that throw looked like, because calling it a completion does not do it justice. It was not heaved into open space hoping the receiver outran coverage. It was not a jump ball at the boundary. It was a precisely timed, precisely placed football thrown to the exact window where the coverage broke, with the velocity to beat the closing safety and the trajectory to land where only his receiver could bring it down. Offensive coordinators rewound that throw multiple times, not to verify it happened, to study how it happened. A quarterback who reads a blitz at that speed, moves in the pocket with that economy, and releases with that placement does not arrive there by accident. That is trained, prepared, composed execution. Here is the specific number that tells the whole story of why that moment mattered. That 52-yard completion was the single longest pass play any Cleveland Browns quarterback produced across the entire 2025 regular season. Any quarterback, over a full year of games. A 23-year-old in his very first NFL start, against a calculated blitz, on a demoralized 2-win team, threw the biggest explosive play any Browns quarterback managed to generate all year. Cleveland won 24-10, and by every credible account from inside that building in the days that followed, something shifted. Players who had mentally started their offseason came back to work that week, carrying different energy. More present, more invested. You cannot manufacture that from the outside. Either a quarterback walks into a huddle and the people around him start believing differently, or they do not. On that day, it happened. Now jump forward to the spring. OTAs 2026. Completely different setting, completely different evaluation context. No crowd, no opposing defense in full pads, no immediate competitive consequence. And yet the descriptive language from people physically standing on that practice field starts landing in exactly the same place it landed in November. This is where I want to slow down and make a point about why specific words matter as much as they do. Professional football evaluation is built entirely on language. Every scout, beat reporter, and analyst develops a precise vocabulary over years of watching quarterbacks. They do not reach for words carelessly. When they call something elite, they have a reference point built from thousands of prior observations. So when multiple people with no connection to each other, watching the same player in different settings months apart, independently land on the same vocabulary, that is not a manufactured narrative. That is documentation arriving from separate sources. Zach Jackson was on that field during the second OTA session, present, watching in real time. He assessed Shedeur Sanders' accuracy as his superpower. Present tense, not potential, not something to develop over time, a quality that is already there. Nathan Zagura, the Browns' own color analyst, watched the same session and used the word elite for two separate technical qualities: ball placement and the ability to vary throw depth and velocity within a single possession. When someone in that position reaches for that word twice in the same breath about the same player, they have seen something they cannot comfortably understate. 3 professional evaluators, independent of each other, all physically present, all landing on the same conclusions without coordinating. That is a pattern, and patterns built from independent sources carry the most reliable signal this sport produces. But the development I genuinely cannot stop thinking about involves Mary Kay Cabot. If you have followed the Cleveland beat this offseason, you know exactly what her name has meant in this conversation. For months, she was the most consistent, most detailed voice constructing the Deshaun Watson narrative. Watson has the inside track. The organization is giving him every legitimate avenue to win the job. She built that story with discipline across the entire offseason arc. She was not casually mentioning Watson. She was reporting it as organizational reality because that was, by all available evidence, what the organizational reality looked like. And then she appeared live on 92.3 The Fan after the second OTA session and described Shedeur Sanders' repetition in a choice drill as a really nice moment and a good sign for him in the competition. Understand what that actually represents. That is not a reporter casually acknowledging the other side to seem balanced. That is the person most professionally committed to the Watson outcome, watching something she genuinely could not fit inside her existing framework and choosing to say so honestly rather than contorting her analysis to protect the angle. When the reporter who spent months carefully building the veteran's case pivots on live radio and calls the rookie's rep a good sign, the accuracy argument stops being theoretical. Something is happening on that practice field that is making it harder for the people closest to the organization to maintain the comfortable version of the story. Then the numbers, because this is where the counter-narrative encounters the part that has no easy answer. Across 5 open practice sessions covering OTAs and mandatory minicamp in 2026, Shedeur Sanders completed 41 of 53 passes, 77.4%, 9 touchdowns, and that completion percentage led every quarterback in the evaluation room. Not second, first. Deshaun Watson, the quarterback carrying $46 million in organizational commitment, the quarterback who by media consensus has supposedly already won a competition that is not concluded, did not post 77.4%. Nobody else in that room did. The 23-year-old with one official NFL start led the entire group in the most fundamental accuracy metric the evaluation window produced. The single interception in that data set came on a tipped pass in a 7-on-7 drill. The ball was deflected at the line of scrimmage after it had already left his hand. A defender redirected the trajectory after release. That is not a decision error. That is not a coverage misread or a moment where pressure fractured his processing. That is a physics event that happens to every quarterback at every level. And if someone is pointing to it as meaningful evidence against him, they are not engaging with the full picture, honestly. So here is the complete picture at once. Best completion percentage in the room. 9 touchdowns across a spring evaluation window. 1 interception on a ball deflected after release. And the longest pass play any Browns quarterback produced during an entire regular season came in his first professional start against a blitz on a team that had already emotionally given up on its year. That is the record the Watson narrative now has to compete with. I am genuinely trying to figure out how it does. I have heard the counter arguments and want to engage with them honestly, because some carry real weight. The financial commitment is not a small thing. $46 million does not get set aside without enormous internal resistance. Peter Schrager, who has genuine relationships inside NFL buildings, reported that the organizational plan is to give Watson every legitimate opportunity to prove himself. That framing reveals something uncomfortable about where the real decision-making pressure originates. When ownership is financially and emotionally anchored to a specific outcome, that pressure does not stay contained at the top. It filters downward through the front office and into the coaching staff in ways that never get formally announced. Todd Monken is 60 years old, and this is his first NFL head coaching position. The pull toward a veteran with a recognizable name, toward someone who was genuinely one of the better quarterbacks in the league back in 2020, is completely human. Career preservation instincts are real. The fear of being wrong about a rookie in your first year running a program at this level is real. I understand all of that without judgment, but here is what I keep returning to when I try to look at this with clear eyes. 2020 was 6 years ago. Watson has started just 22% of Cleveland's possible games over the last 5 seasons. And in the games he has actually played during that stretch, the quarterback who showed up was a measurably reduced version of the player Houston built their franchise around. The anticipation on throws is slower. The explosiveness in open space is largely gone. The precision that defined his best work is inconsistent in ways it never used to be. Meanwhile, the 23-year-old in that room is completing passes at 77.4%, generating the most explosive play any Browns quarterback created all season on his very first start, and producing the kind of independent evaluator agreement that cannot be dismissed as hometown enthusiasm. There is one dimension of this story that gets talked around instead of directly addressed. Multiple people close to this evaluation have suggested that Shedeur Sanders' most significant quality might not be the arm or the completion numbers or the mechanical refinement visible on tape. It might be what happens to the people around him when he is operating in a room. I know how that sounds. It sounds like vague, feel-good language deployed when concrete evidence runs thin. But follow the actual evidence first. A 2-8 team that had emotionally abandoned its season watched one third down conversion in his debut and came back to work the following week carrying different energy. Players who had mentally disengaged found themselves genuinely invested again. You cannot manufacture that. No offensive coordinator draws it up. Either someone has the quality that makes the people around them recalibrate what they believe is possible, or they do not. He does. Pull that thread back through his entire football life, and the pattern holds across every environment he has entered. Teams around him elevate. The collective investment in what is achievable rises. That specific quality is the hardest single thing to find anywhere in professional sports. Organizations spend decades searching for it. Most never locate it. One evaluator framed the core question as directly as I have heard it put. If both quarterbacks played their absolute best football in a genuinely fair evaluation, which one do you build the next decade around? The answer was Shedeur, not because of mechanics alone, not just because of the completion percentage or spring touchdowns or the 52-yard throw against a blitz, but also because of the composure he carries publicly while officially listed as third string on his own roster. The poise of someone who has processed an unfair situation and decided it does not change how he shows up to work. He does not manufacture drama. He does not push back against the structure. He arrives at practice, throws the football well, and lets the record speak. That is not media management. That is character operating under genuine pressure. Every organization that passed on him 141 times before Cleveland called his name is watching this from a distance right now. They are pulling up the Raiders game tape. They are reading the evaluator quotes and noticing that separate professionals are landing on the same language months apart without coordinating. They are watching the reporter who built the Watson narrative pivot on live radio. They are looking at 77.4% sitting at the top of that evaluation room. And somewhere inside each of those facilities, someone is arriving at some version of the same uncomfortable thought. Maybe the institutional wait holds long enough to delay what increasingly looks like a reckoning. Maybe Watson gets the week 1 start, and ownership convinces itself the investment deserves one final runway. Those are real possibilities. Organizational momentum is powerful, and sunk cost psychology is a force that does not respond to statistics, but the accuracy does not disappear because the depth chart says it should. The leadership quality that pulled a dead locker room back to life does not go away because someone with a larger contract gets the first official reps. The ball placement, the layered throws, the ability to process a blitz in a debut start with the calmness of someone who prepared for this his entire life. None of that gets erased regardless of what happens in August. The record is the record. The evaluator language is the evaluator language. The pattern is consistent, documented, and sitting right there for anyone willing to read it honestly. This stopped being a conversation about whether Shedeur Sanders has what it takes to start in the NFL some time ago. What Cleveland is actually deciding right now is something simpler and harder. Not can he do this? Not is he ready? The answer to both of those questions is already visible in everything produced across this evaluation window. The only question left is whether the people inside that building have the clarity to act on what is directly in front of them before someone else benefits from the answer they chose to delay.